남도 조름 서지서 제된 된전 범매를 그변제 샤람닌데 노에 주고 dobjoden gun jobla chansa lo rangam chese sume parsen sangbo jebe chuje yingun tam yawe yado jurjan jase nawe singe time lo jo regam sabe menru dambe so renye lamje lo bru lejen kujen rebo tenze ba yonjin lama gyu baraje la.
This week, the teaching is very much based upon the treasure of knowledge. Having based upon the very treasure of knowledge, in order to again listen to the teachings, that one must first learn to cultivate the pure motivation, altruistic attitude, and thereafter then one must listen attentively to all the teachings. So in the detailed form, this is the title of this very talk, is known as the pervasive treasure of knowledge, and it is also similar to the encyclopedia of the knowledge. But generally the one who has formed this pervasive treasure of knowledge, one who is responsible of, is the jamgon Lord Retired the Great. Great. That he has also formed what is known as the 5 treasures of the jamgon. Basically speaking, that he was also predicted by the Shakyamuni Buddha in the Samadhi Raja Sutra, predicting that in future such individual known as the Lodutaye will develop or clarify the very teaching of Buddha Dharma within or amongst the 5 treasures. So, as such, that Lodutaye or Jamgon Kongtrul Lodutaye was not only famous in his life but also predicted by Shakyamuni Buddha, and also having had a tremendous knowledge of all different traditions, combining not only the practice aspect but also the view practice of every tradition together. He was also known, famous for being Rime, non-sectarian, and thereafter that the first of the 5 treasure is known as Gaju Hanze, which is the very much the teaching, explanation of from, of course, the transmission of the Kajukpa for Mappa and that of the 13 different Sutrayana and the Tantrayana teachings of the very much Kajukpa tradition. So therefore that Kajuk Hanze, the first one, is very much in short based upon the Father Tantra and Mother Tantra explanation of total. In short, in that very teaching and in that very treasure of the Kajuk Hanze, all the teachings of the Kajukpa, visualization, practice, mantra is available. That is the Kajuk Hanze. The second treasure is known as Damganze. This is again based upon, basically that in Tibet there are many traditions, transmission developed, such as Nyimapa, and then Kadamba's tradition, and so forth. And in short, that second treasure, the Damganze, is very much the explanation of what is known as 8 practice transmission of the great chariot. So the great chariot symbolizing the different transmissions or traditions such as the Nyimapa, Kadamba, Kajupa, and so forth, as such existing 8. So it has again full, complete explanation of how those 8 developed in the snowy country of Tibet. So having combined all those explanations and the teachings of the 8 great traditions of how the empowerment, how the practice is done, and how the mantra is practiced, and how the visualization is visualized, that explanation of the 8 great tradition is put together, is known as Damnganje. That's the title of their teaching. So since that our teaching is based upon the very much the 5th treasure, which is called as the pervasive treasure of knowledge, or the pervasive treasure of science. Why this is called the title known as the pervasive treasure of knowledge is that Buddha Shakyamuni provided us various form of teaching, 84,000 collections of the teaching. So 84,000 collection of teaching. Although now there are 2 aspects of such. Buddha himself said, ultimately, I have never given teaching at all. The whole 84,000 collection of teaching received from the very karmic manifestation of the sentient beings, that I, in the ultimate sense, have not given any teaching such as 84,000 collection of teachings. Now, to get back to the idea of this pervasive treasure of knowledge, is that basically that when Shakyamuni turned, gave those 84,000 collection of teaching, whole that 84 collection of teaching could put into 3 vehicles, or what is known as yanas. Particularly that those 3 vehicles are also aimed to cut through or destroy our basic 3 conflicting emotions: attachment, anger, ignorance. And so therefore, he gave teaching to 21,000 teaching as a remedy to cut through the very attachment, 21,000 teachings to the anger or aggression, and 21 teachings as a remedy to cut through the ignorance, and then that of the 21,000 to cut through the all-togetherness of the attachment, anger, ignorance, and forming such together as 84,000 collection of teaching. So in short, that these teachings are known as the Vinayana, Abhidhamma, and the Sutrayana.
Sutra.
No, Sutra or Sutra, just. So if you put them in 3 vehicles, they are known as Vinayana, Abhidhamma, and Sutrayana. But those are based, if one puts it as a collection of the 84,000, they are aimed towards the cutting through the 3 poison. Now particularly, Shakyamuni Buddha explained that the perfection of overcoming the 3 poison is that one must become familiar with the 3 disciplines, the 3 learnings, the learnings of the morality or discipline itself, the learnings of wisdom, and the learning of the samadhi. So those applying the 3 learnings upon oneself, then one is able to actually cut through or overcome the very conflicting emotion of the which we call as the 3 poison. So in short, that the pervasive treasure of knowledge has the very much teaching upon to cut through the 3 poison. Particularly, it has 3 volumes. again, the 3 volumes forming us to develop the 3 learnings. As explained, the 3 learnings are the learnings of the morality or discipline, learnings of the samadhi, the learnings of the that of the wisdom. So the 3 volumes are combined to help us to develop those 3 learnings. So therefore, this very teaching of the pervasive treasure of knowledge is based upon the 3 volumes, giving us the explanation of the 3 learnings, the learnings of the discipline, wisdom, and samadhi. Why the learning of the discipline is necessary in such a teaching is that we all know that we have been wandering in samsara up till at present time. Why have we been wandering in the suffering until now, although many of us and that of the other beings have the desire to liberate ourselves? Regardless of that very desire, why we have not able to liberate ourselves is that based upon the 3 poison, attachment, anger, and ignorance, that these 3 conflicting emotions overwhelmed our mind. And thereafter, that our mind actually not having any independence of itself, being totally under the control of either of the conflicting emotion or this poison or of 3 of such, that it involved, we involved physically, verbally, and mentally with the power and strength that we have accumulated negative karma, and reluctantly that although we do not want to experience suffering, we experience suffering. Although we do like to experience happiness, we do not experience happiness. So therefore, what we again think as ordinary being is that we think that we must abandon the very suffering. No, there is no such thing as abandoning very suffering, but first we have to learn, understand the very cause of suffering, and therefore in this very teaching of the learning of discipline, it explains the very root or cause of suffering, not the very suffering. So not knowing again that the very cause of the suffering, that we think that very suffering that we are not favorable of, we think we need to avoid such, we need to reject the suffering, and we must almost think that the suffering comes from outer part of our body, and suffering is caused from the externally. And sometimes we think that suffering that we undergo or experience is created by someone else to ourselves. So we need to defend from the very suffering. So this all thought, a speculation, creates furthermore confusion in mind. Why we are not able to really experience or cut through the very suffering that we are not favorable of is that we have to first recognize what is suffering. And not only that we need to learn to recognize the suffering, but also we learn how to deal with the very pain or suffering. And the most important of all, that we have to learn what is the cause of the suffering. Because as we have explained earlier, when we are experiencing pain and suffering, we sometimes very much blame the pain, the suffering is caused to us by some external being, from external world. That actually it's not. The suffering has come from external world or from external than ourselves, but suffering is the mind-made suffering. So therefore it's being a matter of the way we think. And since it is very much mind-made, all the suffering is mind-made, we have to learn. So we have to learn how to think it properly inside rather than blaming the pain and suffering to the external world, and since it is a matter of thinking properly within ourselves, that's why the first learning is discipline or morality. So because of that, the first teaching of the Shakyamuni Buddha is also based on what is known as the Four Noble Truths. That among the Four Noble Truths, that the very first teaching of the Four Noble Truths is again Shakyamuni Buddha explaining that we must understand or recognize the suffering. In recognizing the suffering,
this seege dongal sheber cha sungya del tanda chenbu chiyo ares tema do dongal sheber cha kharsin sungya
the explanation here is that there is a great advantage in recognizing the suffering, and having recognized, then we learn again the whole idea of the suffering being the mind-made, that His Eminence want to make clear. It's not simply that recognizing suffering, that your suffering disappears. We're not speaking about that term. That whatever sort of ups and downs, pain that you are going through, intense pain or that of whatever, you must recognize that is very suffering. Then recognizing the very suffering, then what Shakyamuni Buddha said in the second noble truth is abandon the cause of suffering. Not the suffering, but abandon the cause of suffering.
근데 단단 가난 수역에 동al 기 듀트 삼단 단계 요 말아 봐서 동al 코라랑 다 찬도에 지금 삼는 주요 아래스. 근데 제당 의미죠.
At present our situation is such that we simply like to get rid of our pain, our suffering. But we never think about very cause, what caused us to get to that level of intense pain and suffering. So therefore what is being taught here is what is the advantage of the suffering is that if you recognize the suffering, then you look back towards the cause of suffering, which that understanding that you can avoid the suffering by avoiding the very cause. So what is now, if we get back to the idea of the cause of very suffering, not the suffering but the cause of suffering. The cause of suffering, according with the Buddhist philosophy, is the karma and conflicting emotion. Now, karma in Tibetan it's called as le, which is in Sanskrit karma, and to define what is really karma is that actually it's also the habitual patterns that you have developed in many uncountable previous lives, that you have developed a habitual pattern. That is karma. As a result,
the khandesege yorsna sosuge gewa dikba khari cheba yinaya le khandeji sakwa yinaya this sakwa tege bhagcha thi tene kunshi number chebe ki tingdu yungu yores.
As such that it also that karma, the habitual pattern should not be regarded as only negative, that in again uncountable births in emotion, the present, that is the conflicting emotion, and when you engage yourself physically, verbally, mentally into any of the conflicting emotion, you're creating furthermore karma or habitual pattern for the future lives, birth, incarnations, and therefore we are unable to liberate from samsara, and the whole idea of samsara, korwa, in Tibetan means actually spinning, circumambulating, means that we are unable to liberate and we're simply turning, circumambulating. The reason is not able to cut through the very cause of the suffering, which is the conflicting emotion and the habitual patterns. Therefore, that we need to really learn to avoid or abandon the karma and that of the conflicting emotion. Now, with the idea of needing to give up or abandon the karma and conflicting emotion, would really lead us to experience the a freedom, separation from suffering. That abandoning the karma and conflicting emotion is not as simple as the word we utter. It's not as simple as just throwing something behind. It's not as simple as leaving something behind. And it's not simple as that you reject something that is not needed for oneself. This is a question of the habitual pattern that we have developed from many births. And therefore it becomes a very strong in us that it is not something that we can throw it away. Simply hearing it's not good. It is very much like a sticky glue that sticks to your hand and it cannot be washed, yet it keeps on sticking because of the strength of the pattern that we have developed. And to give you furthermore example of this habitual pattern is that which you would be also quite familiar with, is very much becoming addiction to anything, like a drug or becoming alcoholic. Although when you are addicted to anything, such as drug and alcohol, afterwards you know very sure that it's not good for your health, because you're addicted to, you're unable to give it up. That is a very close comparison or the example of the habitual pattern. It is of course just a simple example. One must not take it very literally, because this addiction is only one life's development, this life's development. The habitual pattern that you have developed from many births behind, as we say, uncountable births. So the power and strength you can never match. It's not equal to the addiction here. So since we have so much difficult to break through the addiction in this lifetime, to break through the very habitual pattern of the previous life to the present is very difficult. So therefore, with the idea of giving up, one must not take is a very simple or easy form of leaving something behind, as such that since breaking through the habitual pattern of the previous life is very difficult, that one must maintain a very strong discipline upon oneself as such that in the pervasive treasure of knowledge, the first volume deals with the learning of the discipline, concentrates on the discipline aspect of ourselves to really understand that ability to give up the unwholesome actions. The discipline in Tibetan is tutim, is also translated in Sanskrit as the shila, and many times it's translated as ethics, morality, and so forth. But to explain the meaning of the shila, the discipline, is that basically it could be explained as a general and specific terms. That in the general terms of the discipline or shila is that yourself engaging physically, verbally, and mentally to all wholesome actions of the body, speech, and mind, and avoiding all harmful actions of the body, speech, and mind. Those are very much the branch of the discipline that we are going to speak. The actual discipline in accordance with this very teaching is that it is very much like determination and that of the willpower upon whatever you decide, and particularly in this sense that your sense of confidence that I will become victorious over the conflicting emotion and the habitual pattern. That confidence, that determination, I will, that is also Shila, or that of the discipline in this sense. And thereafter, not only that I will, you have that willpower. I'll do anything to be victorious over such conflicting emotion and habitual pattern. That determination and very much self-confidence in this sense, unshakable self-confidence, is really a true meaning in this particular teaching. Over the habitual pattern and conflicting emotion becomes very difficult because of lack of confidence and lack of willpower. And for example, it is very similar to again being used to, familiar, addicted to, such as smoking and that of the alcohol and so forth. That so even in order to give up those, a simple thing, one need to have a strong determination. One need to have a strong sort of confidence you can do it. So without that determination and confidence, even you give up. After a few days you go back to again smoking or drinking. So therefore that is a sign of your lack of confidence and determination. So again that the determination from the very heart of your mind, so to speak, a depth of your mind is required to do anything, even simple thing as giving up the smoking habit and so forth. And likewise, that if you want to involve in anything, that determination is necessary, and particularly to engage oneself in the positive action, apply some virtuous action upon oneself, a determination to do so, the devotion to do so, confidence is necessary. So it is very much individual's willpower, determination to really maintain the morality, discipline, whatever that one has engaged oneself in. Particularly that based upon that very willpower, then there are many other vows, commitment, which are known as the outer Savaka Yana discipline, inner Bodhisattva Yana discipline, and the secret Mantrayana or the Tantrayana discipline. All those discipline has to be based upon first your own that determination and that of the willpower. Otherwise, with lack of that, those becomes really useless because you have no determination, willpower, and so that becomes very essential. And since that determination becomes very essential, this is why the teaching or learning of the discipline is being put as first and introduced to you. So in this the pervasive treasure of knowledge, in the first volume, which is based upon the very morality, the Shila aspect, it has also explanation of the three disciplines of the Savakayana, Bodhisattvayana, and that of the Mantrayana. So tonight we will have discussion now, and tomorrow we'll continue with this teaching upon the learning of the prajna, or wisdom. The learning of the wisdom is based upon the view, and which we will discuss, explain tomorrow, and now we'll have some question and answer. Any questions, ladies and gentlemen?